Hello everyone, this is Seth Hunter here to share my analysis of our Math Leadership Network participants' responses to our questionnaire, which was provided at the end of our September 18th meeting. This was the first of 4 meetings that will be held in the Math Leadership Network this year. I want to point out something that is different in the questions and responses this year. You'll notice the 5th response on the left-hand side of the screen, the N/A. N/A stands for not applicable, and that was not an option when people were asked to consider their understanding in relation to an activity objective. It was only available when people were asked to consider the usefulness of the learning or behaviors or beliefs or skills or resources connected to an activity. People would have chosen not applicable if they do not view themselves as teacher leaders, since we are sharing everything this year with the expectation that our participants are influencing the beliefs, practices, and knowledge of others. We always will ask folks if it is useful to them as a teacher leader. Those who choose not applicable, in this case, in this questionnaire, 3 people attending the network said that they didn't find it useful to them as a teacher leader. Specific comments that they shared on an open-ended question said that they don't know if they're a teacher leader or they don't view themselves as a teacher leader. We don't know who these 3 people are. The facilitation team has chosen to keep these questionnaires anonymous in hopes that we will get candid and honest feedback, some of which concerns school level or district level relationships. So I can't answer the question as to who these 3 people are, but it's a heads up for the audience of this video. With respect to implementing teacher leadership, we designed an activity that would allow participants to revisit the definition of teacher leadership, what it is, what it isn't, and what it might look like in action. We also shared with them the teacher leader model standards and discussed some of the ways in which participants might expand their influence on school-wide practices, beliefs, and sharing of resources, as well as what it is that they might share. What the responses, one way to interpret these responses is that people certainly see this useful, since the majority of responses are in the agree categories, but understanding isn't quite as high as usefulness. That's a good sign to me, though. Folks see this as meeting a need to improve mathematics achievement, but they are indicating that they need some more help in understanding how to be an effective teacher leader. So that's something that we'll revisit in the network. We then wanted to ask folks, so as a teacher leader, what are you sharing? I'm not going to read through the bullet points, but I will point out what those numbers mean. The 10, for example, connected to building collaborative teacher teams, means that 10 participants said that is something that they have shared or intend to share. FAL is an acronym for Formative Assessment Lessons. TPGES is the Teacher Professional Growth and Effectiveness System. We were also curious as to how people are sharing that which they share. And I didn't tab how many folks were using various methods, but I do want to point out a couple of the ways that folks shared and raise the question as to what the goal is of this sharing. So if the goal is for a teacher leader or a building or a district to say, yes, the teacher leader shared the ideas, shared the resources that they learned of at the network meeting, then sharing mechanisms such as emailing, passing out handouts, summer meetings would definitely indicate success with respect to that goal. However, if the goal is that teacher leaders are attempting to improve mathematics achievements and improve the prevalence of highly effective teaching and learning throughout a school and district, then emailing, passing out handouts, and sharing this during summer meetings would definitely be considered ineffective ways of facilitating professional development. I have question marks. I would have question marks next to faculty meetings as well, possibly the daily conversations. If by faculty meetings people mean that there was an announcement made, that's an ineffective sharing mechanism. We know that for folks to change their practices as adults, that we need to have ongoing support, which many of the other mechanisms address, such as PLCs, mentoring, modeling lessons, and so forth. We also asked folks, what are some obstacles to implementing teacher leadership? Biggest, I think, is the time organizational structures in the building. Somebody said that they weren't sure if teacher leadership as a school improvement strategy was a priority for their school or district. I also want to point out that I have worked and seen success in solving the problem of how to find time and how to reorganize structures in order to allow or support teachers in influencing the practices of others. This one, as an obstacle to implementing teacher leadership, is something that we will try to address during the leadership network meetings. This is akin to the idea that if student performance isn't what we would like for it to be in mathematics, that someone might say, well, the reason it's not what it is because the students don't want to learn. Of course, that's not an acceptable response from a teacher concerning their students, and it's also something that we need to work on with teacher leaders in understanding that just because a colleague doesn't want or isn't willing to change isn't a reason to not support others in improving their practices. So we can discuss that in leadership network meetings, but this is also an area where principals could certainly mentor teacher leaders in helping them to deal with this obstacle. So 3 people said that leadership is not shared among administration and teacher leaders. Teacher leadership is predicated on the assumption that leadership is shared to some degree with teacher leaders. So this is something that we cannot address in the leadership network meetings. The person who holds the leadership functions, and that in this case the building level administrators or possibly district level administrators would need to open the door to share leadership functions with the teacher leader. And then one person said they weren't sure if others recognize them as a teacher leader. All right. One of the major factors in determining how in improving instruction and therefore in improving student achievement in mathematics is developing trust and rapport among teachers, and also developing trust and rapport between administration and the teaching staff. Principals can obviously develop trust and rapport themselves. However, research shows that teacher leaders can actually help boost the trust between administration and staff. Looking at feedback here, we see that participants' understanding and usefulness is somewhat similar. However, many folks asked us to continue to revisit these ideas throughout the year. Some of the specific things that they requested support with were support when they are having face-to-face interactions with colleagues. People said that that they need to have support from their administrators, that administrators need to trust them. Now, of course, that doesn't mean laissez-faire, hands-off, let the teacher leader do whatever they want to, but this goes back to the notion of shared leadership. Paraphrasing. We also helped teacher leaders during our network meeting practice their skills in paraphrasing a conversation, which is an essential skill of those who work with adult learners. As you can see, folks thought that this was useful. Their understanding of this is high, so we'll probably let this alone in future meetings. We spent a significant amount of time in the ovec Leadership Network last year discussing how to orchestrate classroom discussions. This year, at the request of the Kentucky Department of Education, we revisited that, but for our folks, we wanted to take it to the next level, which was asking them to evaluate a video recorded orchestrated classroom discussion. One interpretation is that they want to, they see this as being useful to them as teacher leaders, and their understanding is a bit weaker than the usefulness, which again tells me that we might need to spend some more time on this in the leadership networks. The field-based supports that people requested in orchestrating classroom discussions would include support during planning, which that can be my job, and also the existence of an organizational structure allowing them to observe others and others to observe them, which is what we would call peer observation. Peer observation is not just a one-way street. We think of that as I observe you, you observe me. So that's something that's outside of my control, but something that is within the control of building level leaders. So I'm just going to go through this really quick. What aspects did folks find least helpful with the meeting? We had a mix-up with some slides. Obviously, that was a mistake on our part. Some folks, 4 people, saw defining leadership as something that they already knew. 2 people did not find the paraphrasing activity very useful. And we introduced the teacher professional growth and effectiveness system, which 8 people said was overwhelming. However, that's probably a good place or a natural place for them to be at this point in time, because it's a huge document and the implications of that document are substantial. One person said that repeating was least helpful, but I have no idea what that means. And what did they find most helpful? 6 people said that it was defining teacher leadership. The discussion about what it is that folks are leading other teachers in. So, for example, learning that some teacher leaders are focusing on formative assessment lessons, others feedback for learning, others still data analysis, people found useful, as well as the ways that they are influencing the beliefs, knowledge, and practices of others. Trust and paraphrasing and rapport was something that many found useful. We had 7 people find the professional growth and effectiveness system useful. And then using video, specifically these 4 people said that using video to develop their skills in evaluating the effectiveness of an orchestrated discussion was something that they found useful. So clearly, in case I haven't made the point clear enough yet, teacher leadership as a strategy for school improvement is not something that is wholly under the purview of the facilitation team in the Math Leadership Network. It also may require some adjustments at the school or at the school level in terms of prioritizing this and maybe reallocating resources that would make it easier for teacher leaders to influence their colleagues. If you have questions about how to find the time, so to speak, or if you would also like to get your hands on some tools that would help you evaluate what is the trust like between the teachers and the administrator in a building, or how well is a teacher leader influencing the practices of others, then I have those tools to share, and I look forward to sharing them with you. Thank you for your time.